There's still no answer to why.
That's correct.
Okay, I just want to make sure I wasn't losing something in here. So basically, you know, we're paying for these programs, but we have no academic standards, no expectations academically for these programs, and this is our really the deep poverty programs, which is the CalWORKS program. So if we're talking about impact of poverty on families, and these are the programs where you have parents probably with the least skills and are working to get a job and have some unstable households and so forth and so on, and yet we have no standards for the people who keep their children to have some academic expectations. How cruel in many ways that digs a hole that's deep and even deeper when we can actually lift them up by simply having standards. I know it requires a different kind of training for those who participate in the program, but our expectations ought to be higher for CalWORKS. That's something we must address. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Gaynor?
Jesus.
Appreciate, Ms. Weber, your commentary on that, but because this is a very complicated issue, because it's not just that the families in the deepest poverty have only those slots without standards other than, I mean, the one thing we do have in any kind of license program is we have hygiene and safety standards. But on any other front, in terms of child development, we don't. And we find that even families that are above poverty but still low income, so not eligible for CalWORKS and such, while our Head Start type of programs or our preschool type of programs that have a educational or developmental component, they're few and far between. And so often a family won't even know that that exists, which is why I think we have a number of them that have vacant, I mean, in other words, they have slots that aren't filled, or they're farther away. So not that any of us anecdotal experiences are adequate, but as a 25-year-old very low-income mom with my infant, I brought her to the place in my neighborhood because I couldn't get to any place that was farther. And, you didn't worry. I mean, yes, you'd like some different kind of care potentially, but you got to go to work and you got to, right? And so these are things I think that with my opening comments, if California is serious about child development, then we're going to begin to transform. We're going to set standards. We're going to provide workforce development. We're going to increase pay. We're going to elevate the profession. And, in a way, child care we almost have, while many of us utilize the term without referring to babysitting, in effect, our program, or by not putting the kinds of things I've indicated in place, we've basically sort of, it's like just a place to hold kids, or just a place to hold babies. And I think that, like park them. And I think we need to change that. And we need to think about a long-term plan to do that, and how the different components of what we're talking about, TK, mandatory, kindergarten, other 0 to 3, how do we get that? And how do we get there? And to me, it's not that we don't have the resources, it's that we don't have the plan, and we haven't looked at how our choices, our budgetary priorities. But enough of my commentary. I would like to hear how you just described that we pay more for the slots that don't have that component. How might we reverse that, or without creating huge disruption in this year?
Yes, in 22 counties for preschool-age children, we pay less for the programs that have educational components than we do for the programs, the voucher programs that are just health and safety. I think there are, a number of approaches the legislature could consider in ameliorating that discrepancy. one could address this issue that you are both highlighting now, is in this difference of standards. The legislature could consider increasing the standards of the voucher programs and saying that those programs should include educational components. Now, maybe that couldn't happen overnight, potentially, but it's something to look forward to look to down the road. Alternatively, the legislature could consider using a regional market rate for all programs instead of a standard rate for some programs and a regional rate for others. So I think there are a number of approaches the legislature could take to try to address this. I think, as you've heard from the previous panel, neither the standard reimbursement rate nor the regional market rate has been revisited in quite some time. It merits further consideration to see where could the legislature consider setting the reimbursement rates, either one and the same, all on a regional market rate, or some sort of simplified rate structure that would both maintain access to families and also the care to the families that are currently receiving services.
Yes, I like terms. In the LOA report, it's called Overview of California's Child Care. But I'm wondering, is it really child care we're talking about, or is it early childhood education? Are those the same or they're different? You want to answer that?
I think, Mr. Chavez, I think that's one of the issues that we're highlighting in our assessment on the last page of our handout, that there are components of the child care and development system, which I think gets at the educational component that we're discussing, that there are some elements, some programs that include education for children, and that there are other programs that don't require it, and that as a result we have a bifurcated system where some families are simply guaranteed access and they can choose whomever they would like.
I understand that. I guess I wasn't pointed enough. What is actually your title? Is it child care?
Child care and development system, both
what
components, yes.
Then I would submit that's the problem, because I know when I got involved in this, because when I originally started in this 20 years ago, I was thinking of daycare programs, babysitting, drop kids off when you went away. But when I came back to it later on, I found out we didn't do child care programs. We did early childhood education programs. We changed the term in the Department of Defense. And so, to the question I ask you then, what is the difference between, on your chart, page 3, what is the difference between Child Development Association credentials and child development permits?
It has to do with the number of educational units that the individual must attain.
And so I'm guessing, since CalWORKS only requires a Child Development Association credential of 12 units, that's a lesser degree?
That's correct.
And that the child development permits, I assume because I remember when I was doing it, you had different levels of training for the providers, and then you had a master trainer provider, then you had a center director manager, and then you had a standards person. So I had this whole structure to ensure that, and we were NIAC approved, that we were doing educationally appropriate experiences for all the children at the different ages. Is that what that general child care is about?
Exactly, yes, sir.
And so if we wanted to set up a policy up here from California, what we'd say is that we don't really want to do child development associate credentials. We want to do child development permits. Is that what we're going to try to do?
That is potentially one way that the state could consider changing the requirements that the programs must meet. In addition, the legislature could consider requiring that programs utilize the education foundations or standards that that CDE has developed for these programs, to say that you need to use these guiding principles in providing your care, include educational components, measure the development of these children, these sorts of things. It's not just one component is the education of the teacher, but it's also then what does the teacher do with the children in the classroom.
Yeah, I agree, because I was interested in watching how they ate. They did family dining, with all the kids together, so that you learn how to eat as a family, trying to build the whole family things. And so there's a lot of these different models I was watching as we were doing. So I think that would be a good discussion. I would also maybe somewhere, maybe it's later in the hearing, some of the private institutions that provide this level of care that are NIAC accredited. How many of our child centers are NIAC accredited? Do we require that?
I don't have that off the top of my head, but I could get that to you, sir.
So I got two things coming to me. One is from the other professor on how many families have changed, and now we're going to find out how many of them are actually NIAC accredited, because there's already an institution out there doing this. We need to just elevate our game. So thank you.
Excuse me, I'd like to add that in California there are about 450 centers that are NAYC accredited. We don't have information as far as how many are state funded or privately funded.
I think that'd be really good. Is somebody going to be here later on talking about that? Because I've been asking for that for a while. NIAC accreditation, education to us, so we can see what the opportunities are.
We will see what information we can get to you.
Because I'm sure somebody member Weber would really like that, because that's right up her level of education. And you know what? I agree with him. We got to just raise the bar.
Seeing no further questions, thank you very much. I'd like to invite the next panel addressing ideas for improvement in early education. Lucia Garay and Scott Moore. There's a buzzing on the audio system. Oh, there we go. All right, so first we'd like to welcome Lucia Garay, Executive Director, Early Education Programs and Services of the San Diego County Office of Education.
Good morning, Assemblywoman Shirley Weber and Mr. Marashi and members. It's a pleasure to present to you this morning and bring to you what we do for quality as the San Diego County Office of Education. We operate the Quality Preschool Initiative, which is a very large initiative of an average of $19 million a year. It was given to us by our local First Five Commission, and it includes funding from our local First Five funding, as well as the California Signature Program from California First Five and the Race to the Top Early Learning Challenge. We serve over 13,000 students. Most of them are 3 years and 4 years old, and 12,000 of them are in already subsidized center-based care, either Title V or Head Start. About 1,000 children are completely funded through our local funds. In San Diego, we are committed to address the needs of our youngest and neediest future students. About 50% of San Diego's children under 5 years old are exposed to more than one language in their home, and roughly 25% of them live well below the federal poverty rate, and many more in functional poverty due to the cost of living in our state. These children are the future economy, and as our superintendent, Dr. Rondi Ward, states, if you don't want an achievement gap, don't let it start. We have heard of all the different cuts that we have suffered in the Title V programs affecting our children. We have also heard about how the current voucher rates and the intermittent availability of care for the children receiving vouchers will sometimes place them in situations that are not necessarily rigorous enough to counteract the negative effects of poverty and brain development in high-stress environments. Yet, continuous funding issues have consistently negatively affected both access and quality. We currently have a Title V state-funded system for center-based early education and care that works because it includes educational components. Recent research by American Institute of Research indicates that current center-based system already includes some of the components recommended as best practices and is necessary to really make a difference for our children. However, the same research indicates that our funding level is not enough to implement them, at a quality level that does make that difference. Teacher retention is difficult, and the situation will continue to worsen due to the recent changes to the minimum wage. In early education, we have teachers with college degrees that leave the profession for jobs in retail and business for similar pay yet less responsibility. Now, in San Diego County, we are very fortunate. As in some other regions in the state, we have had a heavy investment through our local First Five Commission's education initiatives. Assemblymember Chavez has mentioned NAEYC accreditation. I would like to say that in our county, we have implemented the Quality Preschool Initiative, which has a quality rating and improvement system, QRIS. These 13,000 children we are serving in 43 different agencies are in programs where we are rating the quality on 7 elements that are essential to a quality program. They are based on an application that are state filed with the federal government, and we are one of the demonstration projects for it. We provide technical assistance on professional development pathways for every teacher, and these represents both the quality and the improvement in the QRIS rating system. Every staff member, including program directors, receives 21 hours of professional development every year, to include 15 hours of one-to-one technical assistance. Because as we know, when teachers leave college and they come into their profession, they still need that one-on-one attention to the individual needs of every group that they have every year. Every set of children is a brand new set of children with brand new needs. Part of the, I don't want to call it accreditation, but the rating system includes external review teams that come in and evaluate the environment and the quality of the teacher interactions with their children in instructional support, concept development, classroom organization, and the emotional support. All of them items Dr. Thompson mentioned. We have found over 8 years of our project in San Diego that the only way to really measure the impact on our children is through the use of the Desired Results Developmental Profile, which is an observational assessment that's mandated by our California Department of Education for our Title V center-based programs. Through those assessments, we have found that teachers who stay in a quality rating and improvement system anywhere from 5 to 7 years yield better results for their students than teachers who have less years in the system, yet a baccalaureate degree. On the other hand, if the teacher has been in a quality rating and improvement system less than 3 years, having an associate's degree is better than only having the permits or the credentials. Likewise, we have found that with this added funding, we have been able to have universal screening for all 13,000 children. Last school year, 95% of our students who were found to be in need of referral services or monitoring received the services within the same school year prior to enrolling in kindergarten. So we know that the elements of quality in early education and care settings has to be addressed in order to make a lasting difference for our children. We know that current Title V funding reimbursements are not enough to cover the cost for quality education in center-based care. And San Diego is an example where we have been able to sustain it thanks to our First Five investment. Our current system is diverse, uses both state and federal funds to serve our children, and offers full and part-day options for families. Across the state, the Child Signature Program will end in June 2015. The Race to the Top Early Learning Challenge, December that same year. And our local First Five revenues are in continuous decline. Since these funding streams have strengthened the current Title V preschool programs during the state's fiscal instability, this scenario is representing an early education funding cliff. The key elements for wise investment of our dollars is in quality, access, and accountability. All depend on funding. Immediate action needs to be given to prevent further damage from too many years of inadequate funding by supporting the elimination of family fees, restoration of reimbursement rates for center-based Title V programs, which have remained at a $34.38 since 2007. Given cost of living and inflation, the equitable amount at present would be about $49 a day. Furthermore, in order to bring early education into 21st century learning for our youngest students, I urge these joint committees to consider the following in determining a fiscally stable, long-lasting solution. Will the state define quality in early education for 0 to 5-year-olds based on research and best practices, capitalizing on efforts already underway in many regions of our state that already enhance our current Title V programs? And will the reforms address the administrator's ability to empower, supervise, and understand and support the learning paradigm research indicates is best for our 0 to 5-year-olds? Leadership at the local educational level will be key. Investing in our 0 to 5-year-olds is the best investment, dollar for dollar, that we can make. I appreciate the opportunity to present with you today, and as you consider investing in our children, because they will be our rainy day fund for tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, let's hold off on questions. Next, we have Scott Moore, Chief Policy Advisor for Early Edge California, which is the primary sponsor for President Pro Tem Steinberg's TK proposal.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, Madam Chair, and members. My name is Scott Moore. I'm Chief Policy Advisor with Early Edge California, as well as a Senior Fellow with the Goldman School of Public Policy, UC Berkeley. It's an honor to be here, and it's a tremendously exciting opportunity that we have this year to have both the Senate and the Assembly come out early on, making early childhood education a top priority. Is something that I've never seen. It's something that I don't think has ever happened before. And it's very exciting to hear everyone talk about how we can get there instead of whether or not we should. We must reinvest. There's no question. We need to build on our existing system. It's a question of how we do that, and can we do that in a way where it works for children and families. I handed out to each of you a folder which has some materials which I'll go over. But I did just want to begin by talking about our children. Recent Stanford research, and Professor Thompson talked a little bit about this, showed that by age 2, low-income children are 6 months behind in language development relative to their higher-income peers. And by age 5, low-income children are more than 2 years behind in language development. So what we know is that the achievement gap is there before children walk through the kindergarten classroom door. And we have great inequity in terms of how the access to early childhood education is provided in this state. Only half of our California low-income preschool-age children have access to state preschool or Head Start, and only 1/4 of children have access to transitional kindergarten. What we know is that when children do not read proficiently by the end of 3rd grade, they're 4 times more likely to drop out of high school. And unfortunately, too few children in California are on track to read well by this all-important milestone. Just 48% of 3rd graders test proficient or better in English language arts. And we pay for it. We pay for it in many ways: remediation, special education. We pay for it in our criminal justice system. There's a recent report that came out from Fight Crime, Invest in Kids that showed that if we were to just invest in high-quality pre-K, we could save $1.1 billion a year just in the reduction of 13,000 prisoners in our prison system. That's the way to reduce our prison population. The question is, how do we get there? And I think that there's a lot of important discussion and debate, universal, targeted being a major point. How does the money flow? Does it go through our public education system? Does it go through how our state preschool program is currently funded? I will say, if you are on the left-hand side of the folder, the second page, you'll notice a handout that says Preschool Quality, What Works? And we've listed a number of the studies that have shown sustained gains for children. Some of them are very old studies, some of them are brand new. And what we have learned is that it needs to be high quality. It needs to be well resourced. And teachers need to be well compensated. Professor Thompson is absolutely correct. Lucia is absolutely correct. We need teachers who have experience in education in early childhood. But we also need teachers that don't get better pay at Starbucks or Nordstrom's. So what we've learned in terms of quality is that when it's high quality, the sustained gains are there, the cost benefits are there. When it's mediocre or low, or there are no standards, those gains, if there are any, fade out. And we've seen that. If we can now turn to just the one-page graphic that talks about the early childhood education system, and this is the proposal that we have. As you can see, and you've heard a lot this morning, we have a very complicated early childhood system. The goal of this proposal is to raise the bar, raise the quality bar to a level that we know will have the kind of impacts on children's success in school and in life that we all hope for and that we all strive for, and that we're all dedicated to. It would expand access to all 4-year-olds to high-quality pre-K by combining what we think is the best of our existing transitional kindergarten program and our existing state preschool program. There are problems with both right now. They have different problems. State preschool, the teacher qualifications aren't what they need to be in order to meet NAEYC standards or in order to meet the National Institute for Early Education Research benchmarks of high quality, or in order to meet the teacher qualification standards of every single program that's had long-lasting results. And the funding is $3,800 per year. We would be blessed to be funded at a level of our current K-12 system, which is also inadequate. So we know that when you have funding at such a low level, and we need to have an additional 2 adults in the classroom, the finances for how do you make this work and do it in a quality way are very challenging. For transitional kindergarten, the challenges are, one, we have teachers that don't have any early childhood education or experience, possibly. And 2, we only have 1 teacher in a classroom of 24, 25, 26 4-year-olds. So by combining the best of both and funding it at a level that we know we can provide the high quality, that's what this proposal is about. We do it with ADA, which means that it needs to go through school districts, but we give options for school districts to contract out with the community-based providers that currently provide state preschool and Head Start. Several other states have taken this approach and have done so successfully. New Jersey is the most well-known example, and 60% of their children are in community-based settings. We very much understand and respect the anxiety around a state preschool provider that currently gets a contract from the state, wondering whether or not they're going to be able to have that same contractual relationship with their school district. We've seen examples where it's worked well in other states and regions like the city of New York. At the same time, I think it's important to say on Early Edge's behalf, we're very dedicated and committed to making sure that we build on our mixed delivery system. And we recognize there's a lot of details that need to be developed and other options that ought to be considered. At the same time that we're looking at expanding access for our 4-year-olds and for all of our 4-year-olds, what that does is allows us to expand access for our low-income 3-year-olds in both state preschool and Head Start, over doubling it. And then also, with our companion proposal, really become a nation-leading state in providing high-quality early learning services for our most vulnerable infants and toddlers. We've heard a lot about the critical importance of those first 3 years of life. The evidence from the research clear as any debate of whether or not it's important. It's just a matter of what we do. Again, it's critical that we have quality in these settings. The federal government has, a program called Early Head Start that serves infants and toddlers. It has a strong evidence base that we can use as a model for how we can transform our own infant-toddler program. There are other evidence-based models out there that we can also learn from, and just to echo Chair Weber's comments, with a real focus on supporting parents and families, because ultimately they're our children's first teachers. So those are the totality of my remarks, and happy to take any questions.